A bus transporting psychiatric patients met with an accident on the highway. 32 patients from the bus took advantage of the chaos and escaped, hiding in a chaotic urban village nearby. I went there to investigate as a private detective, but the filth hidden beneath the truth nearly cost me my life. Monday morning, I was sitting in my private detective agency, grooming my wig. A young woman with a panicked look on her face burst through the door. Her very first sentence was truly "My dad is a fake." I lit a cigarette with interest and asked her to sit down. "Take your time and tell me, why do you say your dad has been replaced?" During the new year, I went back to my hometown to see my dad, and I discovered he had completely changed. The person claiming to be my dad, everything from his looks and accent to his personality, is completely different from my actual father. He is a fraud. Fear twisted the woman's face, making her words incoherent. After chatting with her for a while, I distilled the essence of her story. Her father's name is Yangjia, a factory worker in his 50s, living in an urban village on the outskirts of the city. After his divorce years ago, the daughter, Lily, was placed in her mother's custody. "So, you haven't seen your dad in a year. Could it be that he has been through too much this past year, leading to a sudden, precipitous aging process, which is why he looks different from your memory of him?" "Impossible," Lily denied flatly. "This isn't about aging. How could I? It's impossible that I wouldn't recognize my own father's appearance. My dad's skin was as dark as coal, but this fake dad, now, he is as pale as a vampire, and his frozen, mocking smile is terrifying." "Is that so?" I watched her through the smoke rings. I exhaled. "What is your goal here?" "I want to find my real father and figure out what is going on." I accepted the down payment and took on Lily's case. After she left, I opened my computer and searched for the urban village she mentioned, called Yangjia. I made a discovery immediately. A large headline caught my attention. 32 escaped psychiatric patients in Yangjia have all been returned to the hospital. Not long ago, a bus transporting psychiatric patients was traveling on the highway. Because the driver was drowsy, he lost focus and control, crashing into the guardrail on the side of the road. The front of the bus was mangled, and there was a risk of fire. To ensure the safety of the patients inside, 2 accompanying doctors organized them to get off and wait. But these 32 patients ignored all discipline, like wild horses freed from their reins, recklessly charging into the woods by the roadside, all escaping without looking back. The 2 doctors couldn't catch them. They were panicked, stomping their feet and beating their chests. This scene was filmed by passengers passing by, edited into a short video, and posted online. The ending was, haha, laughing to death. A whole busload of lunatics escaped. The administrator has had a breakdown. The bright red jerseys on the bus, labeled psychiatric hospital, triggered the nerves of net. A wave of panic spread instantly. Those are all psychiatric patients running loose. Is the hospital incompetent? How could such an accident happen? If some lunatic decides to hack someone with a knife, that wouldn't be a joke. Soon, a netizen who loved drama added fuel to the fire by reminding everyone psychiatric patients don't get punished for murder, you know? Under intense public pressure, the director of Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital gave an interview, assuring the public, "Please rest assured, our hospital will do everything in our power to bring all 32 patients back as soon as possible." 32 escaped psychiatric patients were like 32 pebbles thrown into a lake. For a time, people were anxious, and rumors flew everywhere. 2 days later, concerned citizens found clues and posted them online. Last night, midnight, at the graveyard behind Yank, some disheveled guy was digging up graves and piling the dirt into a castle. Hey, near the construction site in Yangjia, there's a guy streaking. Damn it, I ran into a pervert too. In the middle of the night, a woman knocked on my door, saying she left her arm at my place, screaming that I stole her arm. Oh God, she nearly scared me to death. The experiences of encountering lunatics became more frequent and increasingly legendary. All these clues centered around the same location, Yangjia is a densely populated urban village on the city's outskirts. Known for its chaotic order, it contains all sorts of establishments, a massive flow of people, and is a place where all kinds of people mingle. Consequently, the hospital staff launched an intense search operation. With photos and lists in hand, they entered Yangjia overnight, knocking on every door to find people. On the third night after the accident, the doctors lived up to expectations and dragged 32 people out of the residential area of Yangjia, escorting them back to Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital. With that, the public finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, in this perfect ending, there seemed to be a hint of something sinister. Where did Lily's father go? Could he have been wrongly detained in the psychiatric hospital? Perhaps Yang Xinghua's appearance had some resemblance to one of the escaped patients, which caused the mistake to occur. The fake dad Lily described, who was as pale as a vampire, might just be that missing patient, playing a role out of some perverse psychology. There is no time to lose. I must go to the psychiatric hospital immediately to scout the situation. I took out the photo Lily gave me and studied it carefully. In the photo, Yang Xinghua was grinning, showing a mouthful of small white teeth, his wheat-colored skin glowing in the sun, looking simple and cheerful. If Yang Xinghua is really among them, I just need to explain the situation to the doctors, and it will surely clear up the misunderstanding, allowing Yang Xinghua to return to himself. Under the cover of night, I gripped the iron bars outside the window. A rope was tied around my waist, fastened with a tight knot. The other end was tied to the roof railing, very sturdy. In my line of work, high altitude operations are an essential skill. I once wore a cleaner's uniform, clinging to the outside of a floor-to-ceiling window at a 5-star hotel, cleaning the glass, taking the opportunity to photograph an affair, and getting a 100,000 yuan thank you from the spouse. I know how institutions like this hospital operate. If I went to the front door to explain my intentions, they would sweep me out like trash, telling me to get lost from wherever I came. So I bypassed that tedious step. The outer wall of the psychiatric hospital building looked like a row of ghostly, narrow windows, with identical rooms laid out inside. In each room, the stark white hospital beds were very prominent. The patients lay on the beds, neat and orderly, not moving, trapped in the sleep and lethargy brought on by sedatives. I peered at them from outside the window, feeling a bit like Spider-Man. The abnormal situation was concentrated in room 8 on the 4th floor. These 8 wards each had 4 beds, totaling 32 people. Unlike the other patients, these 32 people had their hands and feet chained to the bed legs, obviously in a state of forced confinement. By the moonlight, I discovered that the face of one of the men was remarkably similar to Yang Xinghua in the photo. I tapped on the window glass and called out, "Yang Xinghua." The man turned his face toward me, revealing a look of shock and excitement. He opened his mouth, nodded vigorously, and then pointed to his own mouth. The pale beam of my headlamp shone on his face, and I saw that his mouth was opened wide, like a dark, hollow cave. There was no tongue inside. The sight before me made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The people in the other 3 beds also woke up. One was a woman, one was a child, one was an old man with white hair. They all turned their heads in unison, staring at me with bleak, sorrowful gazes. They all opened their mouths. I slowly turned my head, letting the light from my headlamp shine across their faces one by one. None of them had tongues. My palms were sweating. I could barely hold on, cold sweat. I tried to steady my mind, crawling back to a safe spot on the roof. While contemplating the current situation, 32 patients escaped from the highway, and a few days later, 32 people were captured and brought back to the hospital. Those 32 people were now chained to the beds. Is this number just a coincidence? And the Yangjia resident, Yang Xinghua, had now lost his tongue and appeared in a hospital bed. Where did his tongue go? A bizarre picture slowly unfolded before me. I vaguely guessed what had happened. At the time of the mass escape of the psychiatric patients, it caused a huge uproar online. Facing multiple pressures, the hospital leadership decided that at all costs, they had to drag all 32 people back. But psychiatric patients' minds are impossible to predict, and they had already long since vanished. Trying to track them down in a short time would be as difficult as reaching the heavens. So, the hospital conducted background checks and selected 32 helpless, frail, and sick residents of Yangjia, making them serve as the substitutes for those 32 psychiatric patients. Yang was one of these 32 substitutes. Why were their tongues gone? Because a mute cannot speak, cannot tell the truth. This evil thought made me shudder. To verify this, I needed to go to Yangjia to investigate. If the 32 people captured were innocent residents, then that would mean the 32 real psychiatric patients were still roaming free. With this hypothesis, I rushed to Yangjia overnight to search, but came up with nothing. The midnight checkpoints, the bus stops, I didn't encounter any of the lunatics mentioned online. At sunrise, I decided to go to Yang Xinghua's address to have a look and meet that fake dad who looked as pale as a vampire. Sunlight spilled through the greenery onto the rattan chair on the balcony. A palace-skinned man, legs crossed, was staring intently at a newspaper he held in his hands. I wore the worker's uniform I had just acquired, disguised as a repairman, and tethered myself to the outer wall of his house. While repairing the wall surface, I carefully observed him. He was reading the newspaper with great focus, muttering something to himself. The only flaw was that he was holding the newspaper upside down. I knocked on the window and greeted him. "Hey, buddy, what's your surname?" The fake dad lifted a pair of gentle eyes, smiled, and nodded at me. "Morning. I don't have a surname. My surname is Love." After saying this abstract sentence, he lowered his head and continued reading the paper. From the kitchen came the sound of sizzling and stir-frying. I grabbed the safety rope and moved carefully to the right, exploring toward the kitchen window. Cauliflower and sliced meat were tumbling in the hot oil. A middle-aged woman in an apron was flipping them with a spatula, humming a little tune, a happy smile on her face. According to Lily, Yang Xinghua had a second wife. Is that her mom? Is dinner ready? At this moment, a pointed-faced boy, around 10 years old, poked his head outside the kitchen, bouncing in. "Almost ready. Go wash your hands." The woman urged the boy, "Hurry up and get out. There's too much smoke." A hint of a smile appeared on the boy's face. As he hugged the woman, he stroked her waist, then walked out with his hands behind his back as if nothing had happened. The woman's round eyes darted around, calculating something to her left, and then she suddenly plunged her head into the hot oil pot. I grabbed a slice of meat and stuffed it into my mouth. The sound of loud, hearty chewing filled the room. A moment later, he looked up. He wiped the grease from his face. His expression returned to one of calm composure. "Dinner is served at 8 o'clock sharp." The pale-faced man, the woman in the apron, and the thin-faced boy gathered around the round table. The atmosphere seemed warm and relaxed. While picking at their food and sipping porridge, they chatted about the day's weather. "Remember to take an umbrella when you go out. It has been raining for 10 years now." With a creak, a bedroom door was pushed open. A man in white clothes, wearing a face mask, walked out, carrying a small case. "Morning, doctor." The three at the table greeted him in unison. The masked man's gloomy eyes scanned them coldly. He opened the small case, lazily pulled out a syringe, and a small vial of medicine. With practiced movements, he filled the syringe with liquid. The pale-faced man looked at James warmly. He asked with a smile if he still wanted the strawberry flavor today. The masked man ignored him. Walking straight to the table, the needle was jabbed into his neck. A moment later, all three had received the injection. The smiles vanished from their faces. An expression of detachment from the world froze on all three faces. They continued to move their chopsticks mechanically to feed themselves, but they no longer spoke or lied. I saw all of this from my hiding spot outside the window. What shocked me most of all was the red text printed on the masked man's small case. Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital. When I left Yangjia Village, I was covered in a cold sweat. The scene I witnessed in Yangjia Village was so absurd and bizarre, it was completely beyond my expectations. This family of 3, their mental states were all completely shattered. The mother and son were not really mother and son. The husband and wife were not really a couple. Clearly, they were all patients with mental illnesses. The masked man they called doctor must have been a physician from Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital. This house was just like a hospital ward. The doctor was on duty here, monitoring every move of the 3 patients. But if they were perfectly capable of recapturing these escaped patients, why were they keeping them fenced in at Yangjia Village? My questions continued to multiply. The patients who escaped the car accident, the midnight capture operation of the madmen in Yangjia Village, the people without tongues. What was the connection between them all? I suspected that behind all of this, a sinister plot was brewing. I had an ominous premonition. If I kept digging, I would inevitably get dragged into it, sinking into an abyss from which I could never return. When Yangjia Village was reduced to rubble, amidst the roar of excavators, the truth finally dawned on me. Rows of demolition trucks drove in. Old apartment buildings and houses were being torn down forcefully, collapsing one after another. The building where Yang Xinghua's family lived was also heading toward destruction at that very moment. His home was gone, and the 3 people who lived there had disappeared along with it. The developer's announcement was posted online. This demolition operation had been agreed upon by all residents of Yangjia Village. The compensation plans were all signed and approved by the signing rate was 100%. This demolition linked all the bizarre incidents together, just like a string threading through bamboo. The developer wanted to acquire the land, but 32 nil households holdouts were dissatisfied with the compensation, so they refused to sign. But the developer didn't want to pay any more money. What could they do? They just made them disappear. So the developer brought in 32 people to replace the 32 holdouts. These 32 substitutes had to be honest, reliable, obedient, and able to keep their mouths shut. Moreover, they were willing to serve the plan without asking for anything in return. Those who were long-term controlled by medication, having lost their own autonomy and free will, were the perfect choice. A carefully designed car accident was thus born on the expressway. Their colleagues were also mixed in with the escaped patients, monitoring and directing the operation closely. When the mass escape caused public panic, and netizens urged the authorities to catch the patients quickly, a staged capture operation began. The doctors strutted openly into the urban village, taking away the 32 holdouts in plain sight. Those so-called online rumors of gravediggers running naked or a madwoman holding an arm in Yangjia Village were all part of this operation. The accounts that posted these were all run by the developer, intended to make the capture look more justified. And after the real holdouts vanished, the imposters continued to live in Yangjia Village, signing the compensation agreements in their stead. The plot was perfectly concluded. While organizing my thoughts, I also organized the evidence I had collected. My evidence consisted of 3 parts. First, outside the psychiatric hospital window, I used my phone to film the scene inside the ward. Under the beam of my helmet light, the patients were bound by their hands and feet, their open mouths empty. They had no tongues. Second, outside the window of Yang Shenghu's home, I secretly filmed the doctor, injecting medication into the family of 3. Third, on a corporate records database, I checked the developer and found that the names of the shareholders partially overlapped with those of Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital, proving there was an inextricable link between the two. I made several copies of this evidence and mailed them to provincial and municipal public security and judicial departments. I hoped they would investigate with clear eyes and seek justice for the 32 residents of Yangjia Village. I knew what I was doing was dangerous. If I were to suffer retaliation, I could even lose my life. From the moment I got involved in this, danger had been shadowing me. For the sake of justice, and to protect myself, I had to give it everything I had. I am Joe, the manager of Joe, the detective agency. 1 month after I sent the whistleblower letters, I finally received good news. The director of Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital and the chairman of the Yangjia Village project developer were both arrested and thrown into prison. The official investigation results proved that my speculations were correct. 32 holdouts had been replaced by 32 psychiatric patients. Once this shocking conspiracy was exposed by the media, it immediately triggered a massive social backlash. The calls for justice were overwhelming. The 32 innocent residents who had been imprisoned were rescued by the police and sent to public hospitals for treatment and psychological counseling. The psychiatric hospital was closed down, and the demolition project was halted. Lily was reunited with her father and sent me a thank you letter. Sunlight had finally dispelled the darkness. Everything seemed to be moving in a positive direction, but I faintly caught the scent of death. That day, I received a text message. "Auntie, why did you do this?" The sender was saved as Red Sparrow. The moment I read the message, I understood exactly what had happened. I had signed my name, Joe Yi, at the end of the report. My name must have been leaked somewhere in the middle of the chain, falling into the ears of Red Sparrow. That was why he sent this text to confront me. I replied, "I felt like it." The other side replied, "I need to talk to you." I gripped my phone and smiled. This was the result I had been waiting for. I was very familiar with Red Sparrow. He was the actual controller of Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital, the true master behind it all. Being sharp and cunning, he had pushed someone else to the front to serve as the dean, while hiding in the shadows, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. With the conspiracy exposed, the dean became the scapegoat. Red Sparrow had escaped the investigation and remained at large. He thought he was untouchable. Red Sparrow was surely cowering in his dim study at this moment, scratching his head in deep thought, wondering, why would you do this? Why would my unsentimental lover, WRITE, that report, to take down my hospital? Don't worry, Red Sparrow, I'm coming to find you now. To tell you the whole truth, I put on my trench coat, wrapped my mask and sunglasses tight, and arrived at the meeting point. A single lamp was lit in the dim study. He was wearing lace pajamas, holding a glass of red wine, half reclined in an office chair. He stared at me intensely. That sharp gaze seemed to be asking, why? I walked toward him, step by step. "Auntie, I know you hate me. We can sit down and talk this through. Whatever conditions you want, we can negotiate. Is it necessary to be this ruthless? What good does it do you to destroy my business? You knew full well that I was working with the developer. You were involved in plenty of the dirty work I've done over the years. Aren't you afraid that if they keep digging, you'll be destroyed too?" Hong Jun's voice echoed against the cold walls. I didn't answer. I walked toward him, step by step. I took off my sunglasses. I took off my wig. Hong Jun's expression changed abruptly. "You? Who are you? How could it be you?" He jumped up suddenly, quickly pulling out a handgun hidden under his seat. But the moment he was about to pull the trigger, I was already on him. With my right hand, I knocked his gun away. With my left hand, I drew a dagger and plunged it into his throat. As for that question, go to hell and ask Joe Yi. Following Red Sparrow's dying gasps, there was only the silence of death. So, I have finally reached this point. I sat in the interrogation room. I smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Name, Lin Chuan. Age, 26. Occupation, none. Long-term hospitalization. I have a mental illness. I answered the police's questions one by one, and then began to confess my own crimes. I was an orphan. Losing my parents at a young age shaped me into someone who was self-reliant. At 18, I took the citywide high school mock exams and achieved a top 10 score. One night, after the college entrance exam concluded, I was knocked unconscious from behind while walking alone, and was forcibly locked into a Hanshan Psychiatric Hospital. Later, Red Sparrow's daughter stole my identity, using my name to attend a top university in the provincial capital. They labeled me with an antisocial personality disorder, using it as an excuse to subject me to their treatment. Electric shocks, drugs, beatings, countless tortures eventually distorted my mind. I became a true mental patient. They just hadn't realized it yet. Years of accumulated medication led to making my body build up a tolerance to the drugs. All these years, I disguised myself as a docile lamb, using my small stature and harmless eyes to lower their guard against me, gradually loosening their surveillance. Many times, under the cover of moonlight, I snuck into the hospital leaders' offices and poured through the hospital's archives. From those secret files, I was astonished to find that most of the patients in the hospital were like me, framed and forcibly locked in. They were never mentally ill at all. In one of the folders, there was a list of the top 20 scorers in the high school mock exam. My name had been circled in red, with the word orphan noted beside it. From these documents, I uncovered the plan where Red Sparrow's daughter stole my identity to attend university. In that plan, a private detective named Joe Yi had played a major role for Red Sparrow. My personal profile and background were dug up by him for Red Sparrow. Joe Yi, operating under the title of a private detective, had secretly done many dirty things. Back then, he was just a pet kept by Red Sparrow. The school administrator's office was locked every night, but to bypass the lock, I had spent time figuring out an alternative route. I climbed out through a small window in the hospital corridor. I caught the drain pipe. I crawled along the exterior wall and climbed into the office window. My ability to work at heights was actually honed this way. After the replacement plan in Yangjia Village began, I was selected. I became one of the 32 substitutes. After the car accident occurred, the doctor gave the order. All the patients scattered from the highway. The patients had been injected with drugs in advance. Their minds were disoriented. They couldn't run very far. They really couldn't run very far. Several doctors, watching like tigers, were hiding deep in the woods at that time, monitoring and following us. When the appointed time arrived, they would take the patients to the designated residence homes in Yangjia Village. But the drugs had no effect on me. I ran very fast, and I ran very far. I became the one who slipped through the net. I broke away from the group and rushed toward my own plan of revenge. All 32 nail households were rounded up and taken to the hospital. But on the other hand, one of the 32 patients who escaped had vanished, disappearing without a trace. I was supposed to appear in Yangjia Village, at the home of an innocent girl, to take over her identity. But the doctors couldn't find me. Because of this, for failing to monitor me, the doctors received severe punishment. They would never have guessed that. I had come to Joe, the private detective agency, killed Joe, and transformed myself into Joe. On a Monday morning, Joe Yi made a cup of coffee, opened the window, and breathed in the first fresh air of the workday. I climbed in from outside the window, slipped a rope around her neck, and stole her breath. I also stole her identity. I locked the door from the inside, hid Joe Yes's body in the filing cabinet, put on her clothes, wore the same wig she did, and took her phone. After finishing all this, I unlocked the door, sat back at the desk, and calmed myself by adjusting the wig. Just then, a flustered Lily pushed the door open and told me my dad is a fake. I lit a cigarette with interest and asked her to sit down and explain. My first case after becoming a private detective had just flown in. The coincidence was that the goal of this order coincided perfectly with my own thirst for revenge. Everything that happened later was recorded in the whistleblower letter I wrote. You've already read it, haven't you? Officer, a private detective is a profession that must maintain mystery. Joe wore sunglasses and a mask long-term while alive, and rarely engaged in unnecessary conversation with others. I adopted Joe, yes, disguise, and wasn't identified by any outsiders. Using the fulfillment of Lily's request as an opportunity, I also completed my own revenge plan. The eerie footage I captured at the mental hospital and Yangjing's home became the solid, irrefutable evidence to expose this conspiracy. Luo Qi and Zhou Actually, it was just to satisfy a little mischievous prank of mine. 8 years ago, you found someone to replace me. 8 years later, I came to replace you. After the whistleblower letter was sent out, it brought about the result I wanted. The evil puppets were all caught, and the innocent residents were saved. The only regret was that the Red Sparrow hiding behind the scenes was too arrogant, always able to slip through the cracks of the law and escape. I decided to do it myself. It isn't difficult. I am now Red Sparrow, the old lover of Zhou Min. He didn't expect that the Zhou that he texted and met was a fake. My reason for killing him is simple, both for revenge and for self. Wouldn't you agree, officer? Wouldn't you say so? Officer, cut. Following the director's shout, the lights went up. The staff posing as police in the interrogation room stood up and started moving around. I walked over to shake their hands, then went to take a look. The filming went very well. Thank you, I said after watching the dailies, and indicated that we could wrap up. This short film, themed around an interrogation, after being processed by the editor, was stored away on my computer. Have you heard of the scapegoat effect? In ancient times, religious believers on the Day of Atonement would slaughter a goat as a sacrifice. The goat would act as a substitute for humans, bearing the sin. In this short film, the crimes Lin Chuan confessed to the police, the entire plot, was adapted based on my personal experiences. Lin Chuan in the film has already taken my place to stand trial, and will even take my place to go to prison. How can that not count as my atonement?